Hey there. I thought this would be an interesting topic I could go over, as I believe it's something that is going to be coming up in the future anyway, so I figured what a better time to cover it than sooner rather than later, or at least now. One of the topics that I've been going over with a few people on Discord was, do Gen 3 units need refines? Now granted, there are some units that should absolutely get some. We're talking CYL3 for example, because all of them are pretty bad, or mediocre at the very worst, but that's aside the point. They really will benefit from a refine, and I think they got done dirty when they first released anyway. But what about the rest? Do the rest need refines? Now obviously you can have some of the 5-star locked ones without preferred weapons or Grand Hero Battle ones, such as Lu, Su, Rutger, etc. And those are obvious picks. Like, they'll probably get a refund sooner or later. But what about the ones with preferred weapons already? Like Idun, Tabarn, Leith. Do they really need refines? And that's what I kind of want to discuss. I'm honestly under the camp that not every Gen 3 unit needs a refine. In fact, I think that would be fine if every Gen 3 unit didn't get a refine. I still think there's some Gen 2 units that don't need refines, but that's also aside the point too. I think the problem is that we're getting to a point where power creep is going to continue to manifest over and over again, and while refine may not necessarily fix anything, it will maybe, depending on the refine, will help with combat prowess or support capabilities, obviously, but it's not always a guarantee. Just look at Effie and Juan, for example. But I think just because power creep continues to exist doesn't mean older units generally need a refine. Now, that's not including the Gen 1 units, of course, because they were thrown into the game without any semblance of meta, but they're also getting their own refines. In fact, we just got the announcement of DC refines, which is pretty awesome, so I'm excited for that too. But beyond that, I think that as we go through the game more and more, power creep is going to get more and more intense. But that being said, I don't think just because newer units are going to be better than older units a lot of the time, doesn't mean the older units need to have some sort of upgrade to necessarily one-up their contemporaries. And I think a perfect example would be Keaton. Keaton is a 5-star locked dual phase brave unit who hits extremely hard. In fact, he's probably going to be the strongest hitting one, but fails in comparison to some of his contemporaries because of his stat line and lack of options. Now granted, he could still be a fantastic vantage sweeper because of his super high attack, his wrath he gets, but in comparison to someone like a 4-star Laszlo or a 5-star Winter Altina, he doesn't compete nearly as much. But I think that's okay. I don't think you need every new unit to power creep I don't think you need older units to power creep all the newer ones necessarily. Now, I wouldn't mind if he got a refund, that'd be kind of cool, but I don't think it's really necessary for someone like him. Same with Valoria. Valoria still aged very well because of her support capabilities. Support in general is going to age very well because it's not something you can necessarily power creep all too hard compared to just offensive prowess. But in her case, it's something that she has that's just generally unique. With the double quick impulse on herself and her support is really solid. So in her case, she still hasn't really been power crap per se, but it's another one of those units where I don't see getting a refine. In fact, I think after a certain point in Gen 3, they're just going to stop refining. What I would personally like to see is them giving preferred weapons to all the units that don't have preferred weapons, but that's probably about it. Of course, this also isn't including seasonals. Seasonals with preferred weapons probably shouldn't get refines either, in my opinion, because I think they fall under the same category. But I think we're getting to that point where refines aren't going to be necessary, even though there are going to be units in Gen 3 and beyond that simply do not perform as well as maybe someone from like Gen 2, Gen 1, or even Gen 5 and beyond. And I think that's okay. I don't think we necessarily need every single unit to be power creeping the next unit. I think having that healthy variety of units is a solid way of going about the game personally. Even coming out with new inheritable weapons is always a good idea in my opinion, because it can add more variety to all these other units that maybe didn't get the best refine. Although knowing intelligent systems are probably going to refine a lot of these units anyway, which I don't have a problem with at the slightest. I just don't think it's necessary compared to something like Gen 1 seasonals that were already teased to get refines anyway thanks to Noe. But I think rather than introducing new refines that may or may not potentially even fix a unit, I think we should get more skills, inheritable weapons, as I believe that's going to have a longer stance on the performance of a unit rather than the actual preferred weapon. For example, I would like to see more support weapons, maybe for swords, because as far as I know, we only really have Gishin, which is just a chill attack blade. I think that if we were to get more support swords, for example, that could open up a lot more variety to the mix of sword units, as it's already such an inflated class. For example, Fear has a lot of resistance, and if we were to give her something such as a sabotage sword, for example, she can end up becoming a pseudo support unit through that, which would be a really good thing. Likewise, if we got skills for enemy phase cabs, for example, because that's one of the few classes that still really needs a skill or two to really function, I think we could see a rise in usage for someone like Berkut or Conrad, or any enemy phase cab that can't really function in the player phase all too well. Now granted, there are substitutions for such things. For example, you could still run a sabotage on Fear and then give her the chill attack blade, but I feel like that's not enough to warrant the support usage. Of course, I think there's a lot of things intelligent systems can do with all these older units, as well as think of new skills that I believe would benefit a majority of them. It's just a matter of execution, because we can end up with skills such as Pegasus Flight that, while may not be necessarily bad on the surface, still struggles a lot because a lot of flyer units don't have high resistance, or they don't have a combination of speed and resistance. That's really generally a skill for someone like Sheeta or Claire, but that's really about it. Now granted, there are some units that definitely need both, depending on their stat line, but generally speaking, those are the Gen 1 units anyway, for the most part, or like a really niche class like a ranged flyer. But I honestly think that after they refine CYL 3 and maybe a couple of 5-star locked units in the Gen 3 pool, they should stop refining Gen 3 units. But that's just me. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know down below. Till next time, thanks for watching.